matter how much we prepare, no matter what our dreams and aspirations are, we are not in the driver's seat, we're not in control, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one in control. And this is what we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, that, oh Allah, continue to be in control, and ya Allah, you are the best of planners. And when that happens, it also leads us to a point of ikhlas in our lives. We hit that pinnacle of ikhlas, the pinnacle of sincerity, where in the most difficult moment and in the peak of the most difficult moment, our sincerity is also at that peak and at that level as well. And then Imam Izzuddin bin Abdul Salam rahmatullahi alayhi, as a fourth thing, he mentions that the quality of the human being is that after we turn to Allah in sincerity, we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as muniban ilayh, in inaba, complete submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We talked about inaba and four things that Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi mentions about this word inaba. What does it mean to have muniban ilayhi, having inaba towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He mentions, number one, it includes the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, he says it includes submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, complete submission to God. Number three, the third part of this idea of inaba is that you turn to Him. And number four is that you turn away from everything else. So those are four steps of inaba that Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi mentions. Now we go into the fifth point. This fifth point that he mentions is submissiveness and supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when we are hit hard in regards to any trial and tribulation that we are facing, it forces us to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It forces us to raise our hands and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance. Now, the last 2 points that we mentioned about ikhlas and about turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having that inaba towards Allah that we talked about. And then number 3 is dua. These are components that we look at in dua, having ikhlas when we raise our hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I deal with my servant according to his expectations of me. So when we turn to Allah, we have great expectation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our dua. Because when we go into dua, when we turn in our hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without really being convinced that Allah is going to protect us and Allah is going to fulfill our du'as and our needs, that itself is a first mistake that we make many a times in regards to dua. Expecting and having these expectations from Allah that He's going to accept it. So ikhlas. And then number 2, being one that only turns to Allah and turns away from everything else. See, the reality is that when it comes to trials and tribulations, we make dua to Allah, we turn towards means, and then the third thing we do is that we realize that those means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us are blessings and cannot benefit us or harm us except and until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to either benefit us or harm us. So, every day, every few hours, there's someone posting about what type of vaccinations are out there, right? So every day, every few hours on our community WhatsApp groups and on our friend WhatsApp groups and different social media sites, we get what? These posts and these articles towards the idea of a malaria drug being something that's beneficial, that's going to help us, that may be the what we need as a vaccination, and everybody's talking about it and everybody's promoting it, when we don't realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's going to put that cure in whatever vaccination that we find. And this is what's so hopeful for us all, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that there isn't a single illness that afflicts a human being except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also sent its cure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the cure for every illness and sickness that we are afflicted with. So as we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we turn to Him, we are supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi mentions, Imam Izzuddin ibn Abdul Salam rahmatullahi alayhi mentions in this actual ayah that فَإِذَا مَسَّ الْإِنسَانَ دُرٌّ دَعَانَا, that when we are afflicted as human beings, when harm touches us, it forces us to call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is an ayah of Surah Zumar. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one place says, وَإِذَا مَسَّكُمُ الضُّرُّ فِي الْبَحْرِ ضَلَّ مَن تَدْعُونَ إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. And I mentioned this ayah a few episodes ago, where we talked about when harm touches us, when we are at sea, when we're in that flight, what happens to us? ضَلَّ مَن تَدْعُونَ إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. Everything and everyone we had a habit of turning towards in the times of need vanish from our minds. Meaning they disappear. Our minds don't even go to them. If we would turn to our money, or turn to our physicians, or turn to our wife or our husbands or our children or our parents in the time of needs, in that particular moment everyone vanishes and you turn solely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the nature of human being, that when we raise our hands and when we're in the time of need, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He grants us. And this is one of the ahadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that any affliction that we are faced with, it benefits us by allowing us to increase closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We raise our hands and Allah accepts the dua of the oppressed, or Allah accepts the dua of one who is in difficulty, the one who is facing challenges, the one who is facing trials and tribulations. Your duas are actually accepted in those moments. This is why we hear the statement very commonly that anybody who is sick, ask them for du'as, because a person who is sick, their du'as are more likely and more readily accepted. Because when we are faced with the trial, when we're faced with the situation, not only does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our du'as because of us being under stress and difficulty, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also is giving us that opportunity for our du'as to be accepted. Like Allah is giving us that chance. A lot of people feel very hypocritical at times, that how can I make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in time of need when I don't remember Him any other time of the year? Like why, how can I, like we feel bad. It's like, when we say, when someone calls you, when someone reaches out to you, you say, oh, what do you need now? It's like, why have you come to me? You only call me when you need something. We have many people that we may know that only reach out to us in the time of need, that they'll text us when they need something. They won't just text just to see how we're doing or just to check in, right? But that's not the case with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have that feeling towards any of His servants, that, oh look, He's only coming to me now that He needs something. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is afflicting us at times with these trials and tribulations because He wants that to become an excuse for us to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why Allah is Rahman, and this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rahim. That He is finding ways for us to turn to Him. He's finding ways for us to raise our hands to Him so that Allah can give to us. So Allah has an excuse to give to us. And this is the power of dua. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Ad-du'a mukhul ibadah." Dua is the essence of worship. Raising your hand to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the ayah that's mentioned in our text here is, قُلْ مَنْ يُنَجِّيكُمْ مِنْ ظُلُمَاتِ الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ تَدْعُونَهُ تَضَرُّعًا وَخُفْيًا. Right? The Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that, say, like, O Prophet of Allah, remind people, O human beings, remind yourselves, who rescues you from the darkness of the land and sea? Like, who is going to be there in those dark moments? Who's going to be there in those moments of challenges and difficulties? Who's actually going to answer and respond to your call when you're in need? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us that you call on Him humbly and secretly. These are two of the secrets that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us about dua. That when we turn to dua, we humble ourselves. Ya Allah, we are weak. Ya Allah, we've oppressed ourselves. The dua of Adam alayhi salam. What did Adam alayhi salam say when he committed that mistake? رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. Oh Allah, I've wronged myself. Oh Allah, I oppressed myself. He humbled himself when he made that mistake, while Iblis was arrogant when he made that mistake. So رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Right? Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi uses this ayah as a way of mentioning, the qualities that we should have. Humbling ourselves in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number two is making dua secretly. This is very important. Learn to make dua secretly. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ in one hadith says that have a habit, sallu bil-layl wa nasu niyam. Have a habit of praying when everybody else is sleeping. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while explaining the qualities of the beloved servants, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the qualities of the humble servants and the qualities of the ibadur rahman are that they, in the middle of the night, وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا, that they wake up in the middle of the night and they turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in qiyam and in sajda. وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اصْرِفْ عَنَّا عَذَابَ جَهَنَّمْ إِنَّ عَذَابَهَا كَانَ غَرَامًا, and they turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek protection, because this is one of the qualities of dua. I always say that dua is an opportunity to humble ourselves and to present our challenges to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is an opportunity, as I say, a vent session with Allah, where you're presenting your needs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, this is what I am in need of. Oh Allah, this is my challenge. Oh Allah, I'm weak in this area. You're presenting your weaknesses, you're presenting your challenges to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's one of the beautiful parts and the beautiful lessons that we learn from dua. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to mention in this ayah that you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tadarru'an, begging Him, wa khufya, and out of fear. So you're humble, you're begging, you're fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this word tadarru' is very powerful. It's like when you cry and when you are sad and you're broken inside. Now, many times people feel that crying is necessary for dua. Right? It's definitely something that we are encouraged if we're possible, but sometimes we don't shed tears from our eyes, but our hearts are crying. Because for many of us, there's different ways that we feel hurt, or different ways that we may express our emotions. This is why the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, when you're making dua to Allah, if you can't physically have tears rolling down your cheeks, then pretend you're crying. Like make a face of a person crying. Because that for tears to roll down your cheeks is not a necessity for the acceptance of dua. Many of us can't cry. Many of us will say, I can't cry, but our hearts inside are full of tears and full of pain. That is what is acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we end our session today we conclude our session today by reminding all of us that one of the most powerful blessings of trials and tribulations is that we get a chance to turn to Allah. And it's not hypocritical if we didn't get a chance to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala any other time. But use this as an opportunity and to make a commitment that I will make dua today and I will make dua later. There's so much that we can talk about in regards to dua. What are some times your duas are accepted? These are one of those times when you're facing trials and tribulations, when you're sick, when you're traveling, on the day of Friday between the two khutbahs, on the day of Friday before the Maghrib prayer, between Asr and Maghrib, when it's raining, time for acceptance of du'as, right? If you're an oppressed person, your du'as are accepted. There are so many opportunities that Allah provides for us for du'as to be accepted. Let us take heed of those moments and heed of these moments that we are experiencing to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask Him humbly and in seclusion for Him to help us and guide us and protect us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we find peace and happiness and contentment in turning to Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that I become upset when my servant doesn't turn to me. I become upset. Allah becomes upset. That's the mercy of Allah, that He becomes upset when we don't ask for His blessings and His treasures. That we should turn to Him at all times, and any moment that we have and any opportunity that we have, it's a blessing for us to have that ability. May Allah grant us all tawfiq. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Until tomorrow, salam.